If you could do it all again, yeah, without a second thought. I don't like living. Oh, promises are representing. Woo! Miss T, Xavier representing. And I'm not sure why. JP, that is Jay Patel. Good to see you. Oh, I am so thrilled and excited that you are here. If you have your journal, kind of like this. When I listened to a concert the other day, I decided that I would do a little bit of my stuff. Look at that. See that? Verbal to visual, man. Oh, here's some more. Text and illustrations. Doesn't take much. You don't even have to be a very good writer. You don't even have to be a good picture. We have about 1 minute until we begin, so get yourself. You are ready. I hope the wind's not too much. If you could do it all again. It's time to start. You got 30 seconds. 30 beautiful seconds of your life. What are you going to do with it? 3:33. Make a wish. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. I pray that things don't get too hot back behind my computer as the sun is shining. I want to say good morning, good afternoon, hello, wherever you are. If you are in the southern hemisphere, hello. If you are in the northern hemisphere, hello. I want to say hello to the Gonsalveses, my good friends. I want to say that they were cooking all day on Saturday and they decided to catch up with us. It is possible, although a little crazy, to read 13 chapters in a day and a half so that you can be here on Monday ready for chapter 14. And so I got to give major props to you for being there. I want to say hello to Tyler Oakley, who has been following us. And he is a little brother to a taller graduate of the O'Keefe Class of Excellence. And so I just needed to give massive props to the Oakley family, Maddie, Tyler, Mom, Dad. Hello, it's good to see you. What a beautiful day it is here in Georgia. And what a beautiful day it is to continue the adventure of Billy and his two dogs. And not just that, it's interaction with those wonderful raccoons and all that we are coming into contact with. Chapter 14, after the significant altercation that happened between Reuben, Rainey, and Billy, was a tough ending last Friday. It was a weird place to end, right? Powerful opportunity for us to be thinking a lot about what is up and how do we deal with big moments and how are we going to deal with big moments? Who's going to be there for us? Who's going to be looking out for us? Who's going to be a part of our experience when we have challenges in our life? And Billy is starting to find out who is always present and accounted for. And those are the dogs first, of course. Mom and Dad, always there. And there are a few other people who I hope that you can think of who show up whenever Billy needs help. Depending on the kind of help he needs, he goes and seeks it out from various people because we're not all experts at everything and we don't have all the answers. So you got to find other people in your life who can be support systems. Now, I'm going to tell you today, After all these powerful lessons, this kid has earned his dogs. This kid has trained his dogs. This kid has started getting a little cocky about the fact that he has two very good hunting dogs. He's got Grandpa bragging about him at the store. He's got Ma and Pa. Ma's shaking her head going, oh, you're never going to be safe. Pa's going, oh, don't worry about it. Little sisters are like, when are you going to bring me some candy? But the reality is that he has these dogs to a perfect training perfection, right? I mean, like, if they can hunt the ghost coon, they are at an echelon, at a capability that is beyond almost anything that anybody has ever known in the hollers of Oklahoma or the Ozark Mountains in Missouri or Texas or wherever they are. Like, that's what's up. And so, where do you go from here? Like, why don't you just end the story right now, Wilson Rolls? Why don't you just finish it? Like, wow, they got the ghost coon, and Billy shows that he's got some tout. Like, he's got some willingness to, like, be a man and also give up taking the trophy, right? Like, so where do you go from here, right? Now, let's see where this story goes, because check it out. We're about halfway through this book, and actually we're closer than halfway. I'll tell you, we only have 8 chapters left. 8 chapters. What's going to happen in 8 chapters? My gosh. Let's find out. Chapter 14. You ready? Chapter 14. Starting on page 175 for anybody who happens to have their own book. Chapter 14. Did I say thank you for being here? Thanks for being here. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is good to see you. Chapter 14. A few days later, on his way back from the mill, one of the Hatfield boys stopped at our place. He told me my grandfather wanted to see me. It was unusual for Grandpa to send for me, and it had me very worried. I figured that he wanted to talk to me about the death of Reuben Pritchard. I always enjoyed talking to my grandpa, but I didn't want to talk about Reuben's death. Every time I thought of him, I lived the horrible tragedy all over again. After a practically sleepless night, the next morning, I started out for the store. I was walking along deep in thought when little Ann zipped by me. She was as happy as a young gray squirrel. She wiggled and twisted, and once she barked at me. I looked behind me. There was an old Dan trotting along. He was, sorry, let me reread that. That didn't make any sense, did it? There was old Dan trotting along. He stopped when I turned around. Little Ann came up to me. I scolded them and tried to explain that I wasn't going hunting. I was just going up to the store to see what my grandpa wanted. They couldn't or didn't want to understand. I picked up a small stick and slapped my leg with it. In a deep voice, I said, now you go home, or I'm going to wear you out. This hurt their feelings. With their tails between their legs and trotting side by side, they started back for home. Every little way they would stop and look back at me. It was too much. I couldn't stand it. I began to feel bad all over. Ooh, those dogs got him. You ever do that to your parents? You ever do that? You have that special look? You have that special mama or daddy or mom? Could I? You know how that is? You know how that is. Everybody's got it. Fact is that I can see through Billy's, and I bet your family can too. This hurt their feelings. With their tails between their legs and trotting side by side, they started back. Every little way they would stop and look back at me. It was too much. I couldn't stand it. I began to feel bad all over. Well, all right, I said. Come on, you can go, but Dan, if there are any dogs around that store and you get in a fight, I will not take you hunting for an entire year, and I mean that. Although I knew I didn't. I bet Dan didn't either. They came running, tickled to death. Little Ann took one of her silly spells. She started nipping at the long red tail of old Dan. Not getting any reaction from him, she jumped over him. She barked at him. He wouldn't even look at her. She ran around in front of him and laid down in the trail, acting like a cat ready to spring. Stiff-legged, he walked up close to her, stopped, and showed his teeth. I laughed out loud. I knew he wouldn't bite her any more than he would bite me. He was just acting tough because he was a boy dog. After several attempts to get him to play, Little Ann gave up. Together, they started sniffing around in the underbrush. As I walked up to the front of the store, Grandpa hollered at me from the barn. I went over to him. Right away, he wanted to know all about Reuben's accident. He listened while I told the story over again. After I had my say, Grandpa stood looking down at the ground. There was a deep frown in his face and a hurt look in his eyes. His quietness made me feel uneasy. He finally raised his head and looked at me. What I could see in his friendly old face tore at my heart. It seemed that there were more wrinkles than I had ever seen before. His uncombed, iron gray hair looked almost white. I noticed that his wrinkled old hand trembled as he rubbed the wire-stiff stubble on his chin. In a low voice that quavered as he talked, he said, "Billy, I'm sorry about this, truly sorry. I can't help but feel that I'm in a way at fault." "No, Grandpa," I said. "It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It just happened and nobody could help it." "I know," he said, "but if I hadn't called Reuben's bet, nothing would have happened. I guess when a man gets old, he doesn't think straight. I shouldn't have had let those boys get under my skin." Idiom. Under my skin. Did those boys really crawl under Grandpa's skin? Ooh, that sounds kind of gross. I don't remember them ever doing that. But they did bother him a lot. And so this is under my skin must be an idiom that says that they really got into him and bugged him and got bothersome in his life. So when he says, "I shouldn't have let those boys get under my skin," that actually kind of means I shouldn't have let those boys make me so angry and start making bets that cause kids to die, right? "Grandpa," I said, "Reuben and Rainey could get under anybody's skin. You couldn't help that. Why, they get under everyone's skin that gets close to them." "Yeah, I know," he said, "but I acted like a fool, Billy. I had no idea things were going to turn out like they did, or I wouldn't have called that bet." Wanting to change the conversation, I said, "Grandpa, we won that bet fair and square, but they took my money anyway." I saw the fire come back into his eyes. That made him feel better. He was more like the grandpa I loved. "That's all right," he said. "We'll just forget the $2, won't we?" He stepped over and laid his hand on my shoulder. In a solemn voice, he said, "We won't ever talk about this again. Now I want you to forget it ever happened because it wasn't your fault. Oh, I know it's hard for a boy to ever completely forget something like that. All through your life, you'll think of it now and then, but try not to let it bother you. And don't ever feel guilty about it. It's not good for a young boy to feel that way. It's not good for a young girl to feel that way either. But do you notice? It's not something that he did wrong, that he's just forgetting about and acting like it didn't happen. His grandpa's saying, you've dealt with this. You've felt the pain. You've owned your part in it. And now it's time to forgive yourself because there wasn't anything you could do. So it's not good for a young boy or girl to feel guilty for so long. Let it out. Get rid of it. Move on. Own it." That's what he's saying. I nodded my head, thinking if people would just stop questioning me about Reuben's death, maybe I could forget it. Grandpa said, "Well, the accident wasn't the only thing I wanted to talk to you about. I got something else. Something I think will help both of us forget a lot of things." The twinkle in Grandpa's eye reminded me of what my father had said. Seems like that old man can cook up more deals than anyone in the country. I didn't care how many deals Grandpa cooked up. He was still the best grandpa in the whole wide world. "What have you got?" I asked. "Come on over to the store," he said, "and I'll show you." On our way over, I heard him mutter, "I hope this doesn't turn out like the ghost coon hunt." On entering the store, Grandpa walked to the post office department, came back with a newspaper in his hand. He spread it out on the counter. Pointing with his finger, he said in a loud voice, "Look right there." I looked. The large black letters read, "Championship Coon Hunt to be held." Oh, my eyes popped open. Again, I read the words, Grandpa was chuckling. I said, "Boy, if that isn't something. A championship coon hunt." Wide-eyed, I had asked, "Where are they having this hunt? And what does it have to do with us?" Grandpa was getting excited. Off came his glasses, and out came the old red handkerchief. He blew his breath on the lens and polished them. He snorted a time or two, reared back, and almost shouted, "Do with us? Why, it has everything to do with us. All my life I've wanted to go to one of these big coon hunts. Why, I've even dreamed about it. And now the opportunity has come. Yes, sir, now I can go." He paused. "That is, if it's all right with you and your dogs." I was dumbfounded. I said, "All right with me? Why, Grandpa, you know it's all right with me, but what have I got to do with it?" Grandpa was so excited, I thought he was going to burst a blood vessel. Talking excitedly, he said, "I've got it all fixed, Billy. We can enter Old Dan and Little Ann in this championship hunt." I was so surprised at what Grandpa had said, I couldn't utter a word. At first, I was scared, and then a wonderful feeling came over me. I felt the excitement of the big hunt as it burned its way into my body. I started breathing like I had been running for 100 miles. After several attempts, I croaked, "Can just any dog be in this hunt?" Grandpa almost jumped as he answered, "No, no, sir. Not just any hound can enter. They have to be the best, and they have to be registered, too." He started talking with his hands, pointing to a chair. He said, "Sit down, and I'll tell you all about it." Grandpa calmed down just a little and started talking in a serious voice. "Now, while I fixed my book that got all sloppy. Now, how's Grandpa feeling? Pretty excited, right? Real excited. So, right now, he has had Billy sit down. And he had said that there are two ways that these dogs can get there. Did you hear it? One, they can't just be any old coon hound. They have got to be registered, and they have to be good. Now, here's the deal. He just sat down, and then the author told me this. Grandpa calmed down a little and started talking in a serious voice. When you're a good reader, or at least paying attention, when you hear that the man is going to speak in a serious voice, then you need to hear it in a serious voice, right? I'm not going to be yelling it in some excited way that I'm going to be over at Six Flags or that my best friend is coming over for a sleepover. I'm going to be in a serious way. Like he's, instead of being all freaked out over here, he's going to be coming down and he's talking real with him now. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. That's what my brain does, even if I'm not saying it out loud. Serious voice. "Billy," he said, "it takes some doing to have a set of dogs entered in this hunt. I've been working on this for months. I've written letters on top of letters. I've even had several good friends in town helping me. You see, I've kept a record of all the coons that your dogs have caught. And believe me, their catch is up there with some of the best of them in history. Now, I have already paid the entry fee and everything's fixed. All we have to do is go." "Entry fee? How much did it cost, Grandpa?" I asked. "You let me worry about that," he said. "Now, what do you say? Want to give it a whirl? I understand the winner receives a gold cup, and you never can tell. We might come home with it. We have as good a chance as anyone else." Grandpa had me so worked up by this time, I didn't think anyone else had any good hounds but me. I reared back and blurted, "It's all right with me, Grandpa. Just tell me what to do." Grandpa flew out of gear like a Model T Ford. He slapped the counter with his hand, and in a pent-up voice, he said, "That's the boy. That's the way I like to hear a coon hunter talk." With a questioning look on his face, he asked, "Didn't I see your dogs with you when you came up?" "Yeah, they followed me," I said. "They're outside." "Well, call them in," I said. Or he said, "I've got something for them." I called to him. Little Ann came in the store, walking like she was scared. Old Dan came to the door and stopped. I tried to coax him in, but it was no use. My dogs, never being allowed in a house, were scared to come through the door. Did you hear that? Those dogs have never been inside Billy's house. Ever. So they stand at the door and are a a little weary about hanging out there because they don't get invited inside. They're outdoor dogs. I know that's a little different for us these days, but let's pay attention to that. Grandpa walked over to a hoop of cheese and cut off 2 chunks about the size of my fist. That's a lot of cheese. He walked to the door, talking to old Dan. "What's the matter, boy?" he said. "You scared to come in?" "Well, that shows you're a good dog." He handed him a piece of the cheese. I heard it rattle in his throat as he gulped it down. Grandpa came back and set little Ann up on the counter. He chuckled as he broke the cheese up into small pieces and fed her slowly. "Yes, sir," he said. "I think we have the best darn coon hounds in all these Ozark Mountains. And just as sure as shooting, we're going to win that gold cup." Grandpa didn't have to say that. The way I was feeling, I already had the cup. All I had to do was go and get it. Finished with his feeding of little Ann, Grandpa said, "Now let's see. The hunt starts on the 23rd. That's, well, let's see. It's the 17th. Are you doing the math? Come on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How many days? Oh, you guys didn't come up with it. Oh my gosh. No, I don't think they got Xavier. That's a great question, but that's not the answer. It's the 17th. It starts on the 23rd. They have 6 days, you big goofballs. Okay. Sorry, I'll get back to it. I'll let the story tell us that. "We can leave here early on the morning of the 22nd, he said, "and barring accidents, we should make the camping ground in plenty of time for the grand opening the next day." I asked how we were going. "We'll go in my buggy," he said. "I'll load the tent and everything the night before." I asked him what he wanted me to bring. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing but these 2 little hounds. And you be here early, and I believe I'd let these dogs rest, because we want them in tip-top shape when we get there." I saw the thinking wrinkles bunch up on Grandpa's forehead. You know those? These are called furrows. They kind of look like farmers' furrows, like where you plant seeds in a field. So that means furrowed. Oh. I saw the thinking wrinkles bunch up on Grandpa's forehead. "You reckon your daddy would like to go?" he asked. "As late in the fall as it is, I don't think he's too busy right now, is he?" "No, our crops are all gathered, sir," I said. "We've been clearing some of the bottom land, but that's almost done now." "Well, ask him," he said. "Tell him I'd like to have him go." "I'll ask him," I said. "But you know how Papa is. The farm comes first with him." "I know," Grandpa said, "but you ask him anyway and tell him what I said. Now it's getting late, and you'd better be heading for home." I was almost to the door when Grandpa said, "Wait a minute." What does he always do before Billy leaves, especially after good conversations? Can you think about it? I'm going to give you a hint. I've started noticing this routine. Every time he goes to Grandpa's store and has some good news, before he leaves, he always gets something. It has to do with his 3 sisters. Yeah, check this out. Wait a minute. He walked over behind the candy counter and shook out one of the quarter sacks. He filled it up to the brim, bounced it on the counter a few times, and dropped in a few more gumdrops. With a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face, he handed it to me, saying, "Save some for your sisters." I was so choked up I couldn't say anything. I took it and flew out the door, calling to my dogs. On my way home, I didn't walk on the ground. I was way up in the clouds, just skipping along. Idiom. My head was in the clouds. I was way up in the clouds. Does that mean he's walking around on the clouds? No. It means that he's just light, feeling great. Oh my gosh, I feel so good. He's walking on air. So, on my way home, I didn't walk on the ground. Why? I was way up in the clouds, just skipping along. With a song, I told the sycamore trees and the pop-eyed gray squirrels how happy I was. Little Ann sensed my happiness. She pranced along on the trail with a doggish grin on her face. She begged for a piece of candy, which I so gladly gave her. Even old Dan felt the pleasant atmosphere. His long red tail fanned the air. Once he raised his head and bawled, "Ooh!" I stood still and listened to the droning tones of his deep voice. The sound seemed to be trapped for an instant in the thick timber. It rolled around under the tall white sycamores, beat its way through the wild cane, and found freedom out over the clear blue waters of the Illinois River. The sound, following the river's course, rolled like the beat of a jungle drum. Okay, some of you have been wondering what this is. Many of you already know. Some of you have been paying attention. Yeah, you are so right. Listen to this. He's walking, and the sound following the river's course rolled like the beat of a jungle drum. Do you see how he's comparing one thing to another? He's comparing the sound rolling across the river like a jungle drum. And that is exactly what Xavier just said. A simile. When we have similes, you're going to see me put my pinky up. Using like or as to compare two things, you got to do it. I just love how this setting is being shaped. You see how the setting is feeling like Billy is, and like his dogs, like everything. Not just the person in here, but like the ground and the river, and everything seems to be beautiful. As a writer, you got to pay attention to that. You got to give that to your reader. Listen to this. The sound following the river's course rolled like the beat of a jungle drum. As the echo died away in the distance, silence settled over the bottoms. The gray squirrels stopped their chattering. The wild birds quit their singing. I stood still. No sound could be heard. It seemed that all the creatures of the wild were holding their breath. I gazed up to the towering heights of the tall trees. No leaf was stirring. The silence seemed strained and expectant, like a young boy waiting for a firecracker to explode. That's a good simile right there. I looked at old Dan. He was standing perfectly still with his right front foot raised and his long ears fanned open. He seemed to be listening and challenging any living creature to make a noise. The silence was broken by the whee of a red-tailed hawk. This seemed to be a signal. All around me, the happy atmosphere resumed in its natural state after that hawk. I heard the bam, bam, bam of a woodpecker high in the top of a box elder snag. The cry of a kingfisher and the scream of a blue jay blended perfectly with the drum-like beat. A barking red squirrel glued to the side of a hackberry tree kept time to the music with the beat of his tail. Every noise I heard and each sight I saw was very familiar to me, but I never grew tired of listening and watching. They were a God-sent gift, and I enjoyed each and every one of them. As I skipped along, it was hard for me to realize that all these wonderful things that had happened to me in such a few short years. I had two of the finest little hounds that ever bawled on the trail of a ringtail coon. I had a wonderful mother and a father and 3 sisters. I had the best grandpa a boy could ever have, and to top that all off, I was going on a championship coon hunt. It was no wonder that my heart was bursting with happiness. Wasn't I the luckiest boy in the world? Just a second. I know. I stop sometimes, but I can't stop thinking about things. Did you notice how great he felt in these moments? See how the whole world just kind of glowed with this moment? And I'm going to tell you, you're going to have moments like this. Did you notice that just last chapter, he was saying goodbye and watching the death of somebody almost a year older than him in a challenge he probably shouldn't have been a part of? But in one instance, a switch happens and good stuff happens afterwards. And that's something that I want you to understand. It's like this, you know? Life is like this too. It's going to feel like you're at the top of the mountain sometimes and the bottom of valleys of other times. But I'm going to tell you, keep going. Keep going. Now let's find out what happens when he finally skips on home with all these good feelings in his heart. Everyone was just sitting down to supper when I got home. My sisters quit the table for the candy. I told them to divide it equally. The oldest one asked if I wanted any. No, I said, I brought it all for you. Of course, I didn't tell them about the 4 pieces I had in my pocket. They thanked me with their clear blue eyes. I guess it's pretty hard for a young boy to fool his mama. She took one look at me and called me over. She ruffled up my hair, kissed me, and said, "If my little boy's eyes get any bigger, they're going to pop right out of his head. Now tell me, what are you so happy about?" Before I could say anything, Papa chuckled and asked, "What's going on between you and your grandpa? What are you and that old man cooking up now?" As fast as I could talk, I started telling him about the Big Coon Championship. I told how hard Grandpa had been working to have my dogs entered, and how he had already paid my entry fee. Catching my breath and looking at Papa, I said, "We're going in his buggy, and he wants you to come along." I waited in silence for his reply. Papa sat there staring off into space, sipping his coffee and saying nothing. I knew he was thinking. In the silence, I was sure I could hear my heart thumping. I said, "Papa, please, please go. We'll have a lot of fun, and besides, the winner receives a big golden cup." He scratched his head and said, "Billy, I'd sure like to go, but I don't see how I can with all this work around here." I was beginning to think that Papa wasn't going to go. Then Mama started talking. "Work?" she said. "Why, all the work is practically done. I don't know of one thing you couldn't put off for a few days. Why don't you go? You haven't been anywhere since I don't know when." "It's not the only work I'm thinking of," Papa said. "It's you and the girls." "Why, don't worry about the girls and me," Mama said. "We'll be all right. Besides, it'll be several months yet before I need any help." When Mama said this, it dawned on me. I had been so busy with my coon hunting, I hadn't noticed anything unusual. Mama's tummy was all swelled up. She was going to have another baby. I felt guilty for not having noticed. I went over and put my arms around her and kissed her. Papa spoke up. "Sure going to be a big hunt," he said. "I heard something about it up at that store one day." "Grandpa said that there would be hunters there from everywhere," I said, "and some of the best coon hounds in the entire country." "Do you think you have a chance to win that cup?" Papa asked. I started to answer him when the little one piped up. "They can't beat old Dan and little Ann," she said. "I just bet they can't." Everyone laughed at her serious remark. I would have kissed her, but she had candy, cornbread, and molasses all over her face. I told Papa I didn't know how good those dogs were, but there was one thing I did know. If they beat mine, they would have to hunt harder than they had ever had to hunt before. After I had had my say about the dogs, a silence settled over the dining room. Everyone was looking at Papa and waiting for his final answer. I saw a pleased smile spread over his face. He stood up. "All right, I'll go," he said. "And by golly, we'll bring that gold cup back." My sisters started clapping their hands and squealing with delight. A satisfied smile spread over my mother's face. At that moment, I'm sure no boy in the world could have been happier than I. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks. Mama wiped them away with her apron. In the midst of all the excitement, my little sister, saying not a word, climbed down from her chair. No one said anything. We just watched. Still clutching a spoon in her small hand, she came around the table and walked right up to me. Looking down at the floor, in a bashful voice, she said, "Can I have the gold cup?" Putting my finger under her sticky little chin, I tilted her head up to face me. I smiled as I looked into her clear blue eyes. I said, "Honey, if I win it, I'll give it to no one but you." I had to cross my heart and hope to die several times before she was satisfied. Back in her chair, she gloated over the others. "You just wait and see," she said. "It'll be all mine. Nobody's but mine. And I'll put my banty eggs in it." "Silly, you don't have to put your banty eggs in a gold cup," the oldest one said. "They're just made to look at." That night, I dreamed about gold cups, little red hounds, and coons as big as rain barrels. Once I woke up myself, whooping out to my dogs. The next few days were busy ones for me. Knowing that Papa and I would be gone for several days, I did everything I could to make things convenient for Mama. I chopped a large pile of wood and stacked it close to the kitchen door to make it easy for her to feed our stock. I cut some poles from the hillside and boxed up one of the stalls in the barn. I filled it full of hay so she wouldn't have to climb the ladder to get to the loft. Papa laid down the law to my sisters about being good and helping Mama while we were gone. The day before we were to leave, I was as nervous as a June bug in a hen house. Why would a June bug be nervous in a hen? Oh, I get it. I guess June bugs would get eaten by the hens. So that is why he is so nervous. He is like feeling, oh, I could be eaten up. So I get that. I was as nervous as a June bug in a hen house. The day seemed endless. A few of the miserable hours were spent talking to my dogs. I told them all about the big hunt coming up and how important it was. Now, if you don't win the gold cup, I said, I won't be mad because I know you are going to do your best. Old Dan wouldn't even look at me and paid no attention to what I was saying. He was sulking because I hadn't taken him hunting yet. When I talked to little Ann, it was different. She listened and seemed to understand every word I said. I dreaded to go to bed that night. I thought sleep would be impossible. I must have been more tired than I thought I was. I fell asleep almost immediately. Old Red, our rooster, woke me at daybreak, crowing his fool head off. It was a beautiful morning, clear and frosty. After a good breakfast, we kissed Mama goodbye and started for the store. I'm sure there were a lot of coon hunters in the Ozarks, but on that morning, none could have felt as big and as important as I. Walking along by the side of my father, I threw out my chest and tried hard to keep pace with his long strides. He noticed, and he laughed. You'll have to grow a little bit, he said, before you can take steps that long. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Hearing a noise overhead, I looked up. The gray ones were winging their way southward. I listened to their talking and squawking and wondered what they were saying to each other. Looking to the mountains around us, I saw the mysterious artist who comes at night and paid us a visit. I need to reread that again. I think we're going to get another one of those beautiful Ozark pictures, but listen to what he says here. Looking to the mountains around us, I saw that the mysterious artist who comes at night had paid us a visit. I wondered how he could paint so many different colors in one night. Red, wine, yellow, and rust. My dogs were trotting along in front of us. I smiled at the way their hindquarters shifted to the right. Little Ann would jump and bounce and try to get old Dan to play, but the solemn old boy just jogged along, heedless of anything. You know, Papa said, she doesn't even act like a hound. She is bouncing and playing all the time. Why, she acts more like a little pup than a hound. Yeah, I know, Dad, I said. I've noticed that myself, but you know one thing? She is the smartest dog I have ever seen. Why, some of the things she does are almost unbelievable. Yeah, I know, said Papa, but still, it's strange, very strange. There's only one thing wrong with her, Papa, I said. Yeah, what's that? He asked. You won't believe it, I said, but she is gun-shy. Gun-shy? How do you know she's gun-shy? Papa asked. I didn't know for a long time, I said, until one day, when I was hoeing corn down on the field in the old slough, she and old Dan were digging in a bank after a groundhog. Across the river, some fishermen started shooting a gun. It scared little Ann, and she came running to me, shaking all over and hiding around my legs. Aw, Papa said, maybe you just thought she was scared. No, I didn't, Papa, I said. It happened again up at the store one day. Grandpa shot a chicken hawk. When the gun went off, it scared her half to death. No, she's gun-shy, all right. Oh, well, Papa said, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of dogs are afraid of guns. I know, I said, but you wouldn't think she'd be that way. I believe if I had a gun of my own, I could break her of being gun-shy. Do you hear what he's doing? You know? You remember? How old does he need to be in order to get a gun? 21. Remember? Mama is never going to let him have one. Now he's trying for Daddy. This is how kids try to split Mom and Dad. Uh-huh. Don't tell me you haven't tried that yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, anyway, sorry. Papa looked at me, and he said, from what your mother says, you won't be getting a gun for quite some time yet. I know, I said. When we reached the store, we saw the team was already hitched to the buggy and was standing in front of the store. Grandpa had loaded the tent and several boxes of groceries. I had never seen him in such high spirits. He slapped Papa on the back, saying, I'm sure glad you could go with us. It'll do you good to get out once in a while. Papa laughed and said, it looked like I had to go or have everyone in the whole family mad at me. Looking in the buggy, I saw my axe. I didn't think I would ever want to see it again, but for some reason it didn't look like I thought it would. There was no blood on it, and it looked harmless enough, laying there all clean and bright. Grandpa saw me looking at it, and he came over. I kept it a few days, he said, just in case the marshal wanted to ask some questions. Everything seems to be all right now, and we may need a good axe on this hunt. Grandpa sensed how I felt about the axe. He waited in silence for my answer. The excitement of the hunt was so strong in me. Even the sight of the axe brought back only a fleeting remembrance of Reuben's accident. I said, yeah, we're going to need an axe. Besides, it's a good axe, and there's no use in throwing a good axe away. Papa laughed, reached over and screwed my cap around on my head, saying, that the boy, that's what I wanted you to say. Now, you better go to the barn and get some hay and make a bed in the buggy box for your 2 dogs. Oh, Grandpa said. I said, oh, Grandpa, I said, they can walk. They don't ever get tired. Besides, they're used to walking. Walk? Grandpa almost shouted. They are not going to walk. No, sir. Not if I can help it. You want them to be footsore once they get to the championship? Papa chuckled and said, we can't win a gold cup with 2 sore-footed hounds, can we? That makes sense. Of course not, Grandpa said. Now you go and get that hay like I said. As I turned to go to the barn, I couldn't help but smile. It made me feel good to have my papa and grandpa so concerned about my dogs. I had taken only a few steps when Grandpa said, oh, wait a minute. I stopped and turned around. Walking up to me and glancing toward the house as he did, he whispered, in that empty kraut barrel in the harness room, there's a jug of corn liquor. Cover it up in the hay so your grandma won't see it and bring it back with you. With a twinkle in his eye, he said, you never can tell when we might need some medicine. I knew my father wouldn't drink any of the liquor, but if Grandpa wanted to take a whole barrel, it was all right with me. Just when I thought we were ready to leave, Grandma came bustling out. Grandpa got nervous. He whispered and asked, did you hide the jug good? I nodded my head. Grandma handed Grandpa a pair of long-handle underwear and a scarf, saying, I knew you'd forget something. Long-handle underwear. Long handle. That kind of must be like overall underwear or something like that. That must be like long underwear, like us in Minnesota. When it gets cold, you've got like thermal underwear. So I think in the old days, they called it long handle underwear and a scarf. So Grandma's looking out for Grandpa. Grandpa snorted but knew there was no use arguing with her. She started picking around the groceries, asking about salt, pepper, and matches. Nanny, we've got everything, he said. You must think I'm a baby and don't know how to pack a grub box. A baby, Grandma snorted. Why, you're worse than a baby. At least they have a little sense. You don't have any at all. An old codger like you out chasing coon all over the hills? At her biting remark, I thought Grandpa was going to blow up. He snorted like Daisy, our milk cow, when she had seen a booger. I crawled up in the buggy box with my dogs and hung my feet off the side. Grandma came over and asked me about warm clothes. I told her I had plenty. She kissed me goodbye, and we were on our way to the championship. Oh, oh, oh. That's where the story's headed. A championship hound hunt. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a relatively long chapter because a lot needed to be talked about. Now, what I'm looking for right now is for you to find somebody to go and tell all the big moments of what just happened. Don't forget, talk about why did Billy need to go to the store at the beginning? Next, what did Grandpa have to make him feel better? And why in the world was he floating on air on the way home? What did he tell his mom and dad while they were sitting around the dinner table? What did he have to give his little sisters? Who did he promise that gold cup to? My goodness. Oh, who's going on the coon hunt championship tournament trail with him? How are they traveling? Did Grandpa get away with his corn liquor? Yeah, he did. But I have a feeling that that's going to come out in the wash as well. Oh, by the way, that's an idiom. Coming out in the wash means I think it's going to all come out. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, it is wondrous to see you. I can't thank you enough. After 2 days gone, I figure most people would forget about this stuff, but I cannot fathom and be as grateful as possible as I can without you telling us how much you love doing this. So thank you to everybody who's here. I would do it if only one person showed up, but I will tell you something very important with life. You don't have to be here, but it is really nice that you showed up. Really, really nice. It'd be different if you weren't here. So without any further ado, it's a beautiful day. It's my birthday. And so now I'm going to go and celebrate. I'm going to go have some fun. I'm going to go enjoy this beautiful day. And, well, I don't know. Maybe the gargoyle will too. I hope you did notice him. Yeah, he hasn't missed a chapter yet. Hope you haven't either. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I love you. And more importantly, and with all due respect, get out of here.